Hi, and welcome back to Food for Thinking Jehovah's Witnesses. I have to put the volume up here. Okay. All right, so today's topic is the divine name. And we're going to be discussing the divine name. Some people say Jehovah, others say Yahweh, and still there are others who have like a somewhere in between. But the two most popular ones are Jehovah and Yahweh. Now, in the Hebrew, as we all should know, the name of God is written as four consonants, YHWH. And since ancient Hebrew didn't have the written vowels, we don't really know how it was pronounced back then. However, there are some Greek records that do have vowels, and these records suggest that the name was probably pronounced as Yahweh. YAHWEH. Now, just before the 1st century AD, many Jews started to avoid saying the divine name because they were worried about misusing it and breaking the second commandment. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So, whenever they read the scriptures out loud and came across the divine name, they would use another Hebrew word, Adonai, which means Lord or my Lord instead. Eventually, Hebrews started using the written vowels, which were small marks known as vowel points that were placed either above or below the consonants in a word. So, in the 6th or 7th century, Jews began adding these vowel points to Adonai, over the consonants of YHWH, to remind readers to say Adonai whenever they came across YHWH or Yahweh. Around the 13th century, the name Jehovah came about when Christian scholars took the consonants from Yahweh and added the vowels from Adonai. And this created the sound Yehowah. That's YAHOWAH, which was later spelled as JEHOVAH in Latin. So again, now we're going into Latin. Forget about Hebrew and Greek. Now, boom, we're in Latin. The first time this spelling was recorded was by a Spanish Dominican monk named Raimundus Martini in 1270. Interestingly, this information is acknowledged in many Jehovah's Witness publications. For example, the February 1st, 1980 Watchtower, it says that the divine name was used in early history is beyond question. But what about later times? Why have certain Bible translations omitted the name, and what is its meaning and significance to us? Interestingly, Raimundus Martini, a Spanish monk of the Dominican order, first rendered the divine name as Jehovah. That's without the H. It's JEHOVA. This form appeared in the book Purgio Fidei, published in 1270 CE, so over 700 years ago. Then we have the brochure, The Divine Name That Endures Forever. And I'm going to butcher all these names, so it says Raimundus Martini, a Spanish monk, used the spelling Yehowah soon after in 13. Martini used the spelling Yehowah. Soon after, in 1303, Pochetus de Salvaticis completed a work entitled, I'll just give you the English translation, Pochetus' Victory Against the Ungodly Hebrews. In this, he too mentioned God's name, spelling it variously. So there are three spellings here, and they all start with I. So it's IOHOUAH or IOHOUA without the H, And then there's IHOUAH. Then it goes on to say that in 1518, Petrus Galatinus published a work entitled Concerning Secrets of the Universal Truth, in which he spells God's name, IEHOUA. Then we have a much earlier Watchtower from December 1st, 1950, and these can all be found on jw.org. Raimundus Martini, it says Jehovah had been used long before Galatinus, even a generation before Pocetus de Salvaticis wrote his Victoria contra Judeos in 1303. Then it mentions the Spanish Dominican friar Raimundus Martini wrote his Pugio about 1278. So now this, before it was 1270, now they say 1278. And it says, use the name Jehovah. It's kind of not quite right because they say Jehovah, but when you look at the actual quote, it's not Jehovah. And then it says, in fact, Pocetus took the contents of his Victoria largely from Martini's Pugio. Then it says, and Scaliga proves that Galatinus took his De Arcanis bodily from Martini's Pugio. Galatinus did not introduce the pronunciation Jehovah, but merely defended it against those who pronounced the Hebrew tetragrammaton Jova. All right, let's go with something much easier, okay? Aid to Bible Understanding on page 885. Raimundus Martini, a Spanish monk of the Dominican order, used it in his book Pugio Fidei of the year 1270. All right, so it's interesting to note that the Watchtower has acknowledged in print that Jehovah is not actually God's name. On page 23 of the foreword to the Kingdom Interlinear translation of the Greek scriptures, it states, while inclining to view the pronunciation Yahweh as the more correct way, we have retained the form Jehovah because of people's familiarity with it since the 14th century. Moreover, it preserves equally with other forms the four letters of the tetragrammaton JHVH. And this was written by the New World Bible Translation Committee, February 9, 1950. And this is the 1969 edition of this Kingdom Interlinear. But notice that this translation committee, they say, while inclining to view the pronunciation Yahweh as the more correct way. So they're saying, yeah, we believe that the evidence points to Yahweh being the correct name, the correct form use of the divine name. But, you know, people are more familiar with Jehovah. And so we're going to go with that. And then they change the tetragrammaton from YHWH to JHVH so that it looks more like Jehovah. But actually the tetragrammaton is YHWH, not JHVH. So, if Yahweh is indeed, as they say, the more correct way, then it implies that Jehovah is not truly God's name. And notice that the 1985 edition of this book altered the original quote. So now they reprinted the book some almost 20 years later, and this is what it says. While many are inclined to view the pronunciation Yahweh as the more correct way, we have retained the form Jehovah because of people's familiarity with it for centuries. Moreover, it preserves equally with other forms the four letters of the divine name, YHWH, and then they have in brackets, or JHVH. Now, you notice the difference? Notice in the first edition, the society admitted that they were inclined to view the pronunciation Yahweh as the more correct way. This is written by the translation committee. This is what they're saying. They changed it to seem as if others viewed it as such. modifying a quote to hide what was originally published by the New World Bible Translation Committee, it's a form of dishonesty that should shock and anger all truth seekers. Okay? What's ironic is that Jehovah's Witnesses loathe the Catholic Church and have done everything in their power to strip their church of any trace of Catholicism. And despite this, their group's very name contains a Catholic invention, that is, the name Jehovah. So, Jehovah's Witnesses criticize traditional Christianity for hiding God's name by substituting Jehovah with the Lord whenever Jehovah is mentioned in the Bible. They claim this is a Jewish superstition that disrespects God, which it really doesn't. However, their own group has a name that was created from the same mindset that led to the use of the Lord. So, can't have it both ways, friends. If you've enjoyed this presentation, please hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe so that you're notified of future presentations. And I'm thinking of putting together a second part to this issue of about the name Jehovah that I found very interesting. And it goes back to a splinter group from the 40s, I believe, early 40s. And there were lots of splinter groups in the 20s and 30s. And there was one gentleman, JHVH. I believe he was a pilgrim. A pilgrim today would be a traveling overseer for the society. Represented them, traveled all over. And he split off and he started his own group. And they call themselves Servants of Yah. Now, if you Google Servants of Yah, you're going to find all kinds of other groups that are not affiliated with them, with this original group that's been defunct for I don't know how many decades. But it's interesting because one of the key teachings that they have is that Yah is the name of God and that Jehovah is actually the name of Satan. So I put something together. I'll present it to you and take it the way you want. I thought it was interesting though. So until next time, Lord bless and take care. Bye-bye.